Hello and welcome to the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. This is your regular update for all your tillage news and advice. Assessing the impact of tillage systems and rotations is becoming increasingly important, not only for profitability, but also for biodiversity and for the wider environment that we live in. There is terrific research being carried out all across Europe in this area. However, finding work in a climate which is similar to Ireland and therefore results which may be somewhat repeatable here is more difficult. I was lucky enough to visit the James Hutton Institute in Scotland a couple of years ago and got a look around their impressive large-scale farm-based trials. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Cathy Hawes, a researcher into James Hutton just outside Dundee in Scotland, to discuss ongoing trials there. Cathy, you're very welcome and I'm delighted you could join us. So Cathy, you might describe a little bit about the James Hutton Institute for us.
The James Hutton Institute is divided across two main sites. We've got an institute site at Dundee and another one in Aberdeen, associated with two research farms. So in Aberdeen at Glensock Farm, it's an upland livestock and agroforestry site, about 1,000 hectares there. And down near Dundee, the Belrudder and Milnfield farms are roughly 270 hectares. And that's for arable and soft fruit production. The research covers quite a wide range of areas, all sorts of focusing on protecting and enhancing resilience and sustainability, looking at both natural and farm ecosystems, trying to design systems for multiple benefits. And at the Dundee site, we've also got a lot of research looking at developing new crops and production methods to help develop better food security and environmental protection. So all of this research involves a lot of engagement with farmers. So we have a number of regular annual events at both sites. So Arable Scotland, there's a Leaf Technical Days, Royal Highland Show we're involved with every year, Food for the Future and that sort of thing. As well as informal visits and farm tours and workshops and that kind of thing. But also more recently, there's been a lot more research that is directly involved with farmers where trials are carried out on commercial farms. So there's a couple of EU projects that we're involved with at the moment on biodiversity management with farmer clusters. Intercropping trials as part of a Diversify project, and legume-based systems. So a good combination of experimental sites and on-farm commercial trials too.
Okay, and I suppose most of the results that you're talking about there would be pretty farmer ready, if you like. They could probably take them on relatively quickly, could they?
Yes, it's all designed to be commercially realistic and something that people can do quickly and easily. A lot of that is to do with direct drilling and intercropping trials particularly.
Okay, so Cathy, your role then, James Hutton, what specifically is your major interest?
I'm an ecologist. My background's in plant and insect ecology. I'm looking at the impact of management practices on biodiversity, and the use of biodiversity for ecosystem services and the functioning of arable ecosystems. So I'm coming at it from that perspective.
Okay, very good. So, and I suppose that maybe just before we get into the trial I want to discuss with you, what I want to just do is give our listeners maybe a little bit of an indication about how similar Scotland is in comparison to Ireland, maybe in terms of typical rainfall or the average yields that you would see up around your part of the world in terms of winter wheat or spring barley.
Sure. Yeah. Well, actually, we're on the east coast here, so it's actually quite dry. I think the average rainfall is about 800 mils. And it's particularly dry in the spring, which can be a problem for establishment, particularly sort of undersown crops like undersown clover and a spring barley. So those are the sort of issues we have over on the arable east side of the country. Spring barley yields are about 6 tons per hectare, and winter wheat would be around about 8.
Okay, so I suppose just in context, I suppose people can often forget about mils versus inches. So I mean, 850, as you mentioned there, would be similar to Carlow, in Oak Park, very similar to that. And yields are maybe a wee bit lower than we would get here in Ireland. But look, it gives people a little bit of context at least anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of this long-term cropping study that you have, maybe you might describe the types of areas that you're trying to look at within that long-term study, and I suppose maybe the purposes, the overall aims of what it's trying to achieve.
Okay, yeah, sure. It's a long-term trial that was set up in 2009, and I guess the aim is to look at designing a cropping system that gives you multiple benefits. So we're trying to improve the quality of the soil, improve biodiversity, and reduce pollution from the system, but doing all of those things while maintaining crop yields. So we're looking at multiple benefits and increasing the efficiency of production so that we can grow good quality crops at financially viable yield levels, but without the environmental impact that we sometimes see. So the platform was set up in 2009. So we're now halfway through the second 6-year rotation. It's a 46 hectare site covering 6 fields, and the rotation is a potato, winter wheat, winter barley, oilseed rape, and beans and spring barley. So it's more diverse than you would normally expect, but we chose those crops because they're representative of the area that we're in, and the focus for a lot of the research of the Institute. So we wanted to be able to include that full range of crops so that we can say how they respond to a lower input, hopefully more sustainable cropping system. So we divided each of those 6 fields into 2 halves, so that we can test the effect of the integrated cropping system against standard conventional practice. So you've got a baseline against which to measure the impact that we're having.
I was lucky enough, Cathy, to come across and visit you there a couple of years ago, and it's a lovely site that you have, lovely, I suppose, undulating hills around you, with a stream running down through the centre of it. Might describe the soil as kind of a clay loam kind of soil, I think, maybe, is it?
Yeah, silty clay loam.
Silty clay loam. So it's lovely. It's a really lovely site. But in terms of when we were there, you were mentioning that the system you're trying to measure sustainability, and you had a lot of different measures around that. Maybe you might describe some of the components that you have and that you are measuring in that.
Yeah, sure. We basically try to cover everything, which can be a bit of a challenge, because the idea is that we're taking a whole systems approach. So it's important in this sort of study not to look at any one aspect in isolation, because there are so many trade-offs that you get between the different parts of the system. So the way that we're trying to get around that is to look at a set of key indicators. So we've got indicators of the economic and environmental components of sustainability. So from the economic side of things, it's indicators that give you an estimate of financial margin. So input costs, tractor time, fuel use, obviously yield, and sale prices. So those things together give you a relative measure of the difference between the cropping systems. From the environmental side of things, we've got indicators of soil quality. So this is things like physical structure, plant nutrients, carbon content, microbial diversity, and soil functions like litter decomposition and nutrient turnover. And then for biodiversity, we've got measures of plant and invertebrate diversity, particularly focusing on beneficial insects like pollinators and natural enemies. And we're looking at weeds, infield weeds, both in terms of the diversity and for the resource that they provide to pollinators, but also balancing that against competition with the crop, where the abundance gets too high. And then the sort of final aspect of that is the crop itself. So obviously we've got yield mapping, but also measures of pest and disease incidence and crop development through the season. So we're measuring all of those indicators in both cropping systems across the 6-year rotation, so that we can hopefully get a reasonable idea for the overall impact on sustainability.
Okay, well, by the sounds of all that, I hope you have an army of people helping you trying to figure out and measure all of those various different areas, because it sounds very comprehensive, and I suppose it's brilliant that there is a trial like that looking at all those various different aspects, because I suppose any system has to be looked at in its whole to get to see what the pluses and minuses are for any part of it.
Mhm.
Just ask you then, in terms of the establishment systems that you have running in that systems trial, what are they? And maybe you might describe why they were chosen.
Uh-huh. Well, the for the conventional side, it's just the standard multiple plough, just because that's the most commonly used cultivation in the area. And so that's our sort of baseline standard. On the integrated side, the aim is to reduce soil disturbance as much as possible, so that you're protecting soil structure and soil processes driven by the microbes and earthworms and things like that. So we're trying to get to a completely no-till system on the integrated side. But obviously there's potatoes in there. So it works out as no-till or direct drill for 5 years in the 6-year rotation. And it's actually quite interesting having that potato year as where the soil is then completely disturbed. Because you can look at over multiple rotations, whether in the integrated system, whether the reduced disturbance in the intervening years, whether that gives you an overall sort of stepwise improvement over time, or whether that potato year knocks it right back to the lower quality of the baseline.
You're probably not. Are you far enough into it in terms of rotations to know that as yet, or that'll be something in your
No,
6 years?
there's a hint. Yeah, there's a hint that there is an improvement in soil structure within the potato year under the integrated system compared to conventional. But we would need several rotations more to get the full data set to show that long-term trend. And it's important for these kinds of studies to be funded and to go ahead, because it's rare to have such a long-term data series to be able to look at those sorts of trends and impacts over time.
And you're including other components, I suppose, within that system as well. You've organic manures, I read, and you've reducing pesticides and reducing chemical fertilizers. I suppose that's a challenge we have here in Ireland as well, especially with the Green Deal parameters coming at us in terms of trying to increase carbon storage in soils, but also to reduce those other chemical inputs. Maybe you might briefly describe what's going on in those areas in the trial.
Yeah, sure. So there are those three sort of key aspects to it, really. For the soil biophysical structure, that's all about increasing the carbon content of the soil, the organic matter content. So to do this, we're adding green municipal waste compost at 10 tonnes per hectare every year. But we're also chopping and incorporating the straw of the crop residue as an additional carbon input. So that's rather than baling, the crop residue is incorporated also. And there's cover crops as well. So the extra biomass material that's produced by the cover crop is incorporated. So there are a number of different strategies to input a higher level of carbon into the soil. And this is important for crop rooting, getting a better soil structure for crop roots, which makes nutrient and water uptake more efficient and boosts the soil microbial community as well. So that's the aim of it. And on top of that, you've obviously got the reduced disturbance from the tillage as well. For pesticides, we're using IPM sort of strategy, so blight forecasting, to potentially reduce the number of applications of pesticides. And it's about trying to take a more targeted approach rather than prophylactic sprays. In addition to that, we've got biofortification with minerals. So the idea here is to boost plant health and increase the resilience of the crop to pest and disease, so they're more able to fight off any incidents of disease that's there.
This is the likes of biostimulants and that kind of thing, Cathy, or something different?
No, it's biostimulants. There's a whole area there that we're looking into, and there are sort of separate trials going on to look at what might be most appropriate for the crops that we've got in the rotation, and then it's a case of choosing which look most beneficial, and then incorporating those into the cropping system as part of the management. And then we've also got wildflower margins, and looking at increasing the diversity of infield weeds. Now, this is to attract the natural enemies of crop pests, and look at how that's maintaining pest populations below threshold levels. So again, it's a combination of different approaches that together should give you a more efficient system.
Okay, so as I said, it's a very large, it's a very complex type system. So for use, you for keeping on top of it. But is there any particular standout results which you have seen coming through that are stable across systems or years?
Yeah, surprisingly, actually, we weren't expecting to get consistent results this early on. In a long-term trial like this, it takes a while for the differences between the systems to establish, particularly when you're talking about soil. But we have found that the increase in soil carbon is giving a better soil structure and a higher nutrient use efficiency. So there's a knock-on effect through the soil structure to the crop plants, and we've been able over the first rotation and into the second rotation to reduce the mineral fertilizer inputs quite substantially, and still get no significant difference in yield between the cropping systems. So that's been a really nice result, and we're also finding that the soil has got a sort of pest suppressive capability that's increasing as we go through the rotations over time. So at the start, the soil microbial community was a bit unbalanced, and we ended up with a greater incidence of soil-borne pathogens. But over time, that balance has come through better, and it's actually performing in a pest suppressive way.
And when you say more efficient nutrient use, is that nitrogen or P and K? Is that?
It's nitrogen that we're focused on, but P also, but I would need to go back and do the calculations to work that out properly. Nitrogen is the big one because it's that has the biggest impact on greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. And the carbon footprint.
And so obviously you're looking at two very different systems in terms of establishment systems there, and they are lots of very different complex things. Most people out there, I suppose, are on a conventional type of system. Is there any quick wins? Is there anything kind of coming through it that you could kind of say that, look, you're a conventional farmer, you can take this part of it up and you can drive this through your management structure, and it's a win-win for you and the environment and biodiversity and all the other parameters that you're looking at.
Yes, definitely. The thing that we've found over and over again with this is that you have to tailor your management system to your specific field and farm. There are no sort of general one-size-fits-all kind of rules. So what we're trying to aim for is a pick and mix or toolbox, toolkit type strategy. So there's a range of things that you can do, and you tailor that according to what your aims are on your farm and the system that you've got. But overall, increasing the soil carbon and organic matter content and biodiversity strategies, particularly in terms of field margins, would be the two sort of really big obvious things that you could do that have the greatest knock-on effect to the rest of the system, and maintaining those yields with a better environment.
Okay, so a final question for you, Cathy, and look, I'd love to stay talking about this for a long time because there's such a wealth of information coming out of it. But you mentioned the whole tailoring part, that a farmer needs to tailor to his own specific circumstances on the farm, which sounds like an increased level of management by any particular farm. And I suppose the corollary of that is that there'll be very little or less, I suppose, of the prophylactic treatments, the kind of, one size fits all, chuck it out onto 100 or 1,000 acres and that's how we're going to manage it. Do we need a different type of education of farmers in the future to try and bring them up to the level where they should be to try and take advantage of all the results that you have here?
Although in reverse, I think we've got a lot to learn from farmers' direct experience. I mean, they will know the land better than anybody. So a lot of the things that we're saying, each particular option might seem dead obvious to a particular farmer, but if you're then combining strategies to increase efficiency, I think that's where the novelty is, and those sorts of messages, if we can get them out there and discuss them with farmers for particular, tailoring them to particular situations, I think there would be huge benefit there.
Okay, Cathy, thanks very much for your time. It's been great to talk to you today, and hopefully we'll come back to you maybe later on in 2021 and talk to you about the larger trials there, and perhaps hook up with some of your colleagues as well with some of the other interesting trials you mentioned as well. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much. You'd be very welcome.
That's it for the Tillage Edge this week, and my thanks to Cathy for joining me. The Teagasc Tillage Month continues with the first part of the National Tillage Conference scheduled for next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. For more details, go to www.teagasc.ie/Tillage Month for more details. Don't forget, if you like this podcast, recommend it to a friend or colleague, and always rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcast or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more farming news, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.